picking up relevant points which can be relevant for everybody present here. So first, very important change that has happened is that the new regime tax rates have been tweaked. So they have simplified the taxes, they have lowered the taxes. So basically last year or last year, they introduced two tax regimes. One was the old one that was going in which you got all your deductions, all your ATC, ATD, and you also got, if you were earning a salary, you also got a standard deduction. So that is the old regime. They came out with a new regime wherein they said that we will lower down your taxes. You pay taxes at a flat rate as per the slab and do not claim any deductions. So that was the new tax regime, basically to simplify things for everyone. So now they have further tweaked the new tax regime and they have further reduced the tax rates for everyone. Earlier, what used to happen was old tax was the default regime under which your employer used to deduct your TDS. Now the new one is your default regime, and if you want to opt for the old one, you will have to intimate to your employer that you want to opt for the old regime. So, well, income up to 7 lakhs has been exempted. The no tax has to be paid by way of a rebate. So earlier, up to 5 lakhs, there was no tax because whatever tax came out was reduced by way of a rebate. That has now been increased to 7 lakhs. So that is one big change that has been done for all the salaried individuals, in fact, for all individuals. They've also reduced the surcharge, the highest surcharge that was applicable. It was 37% earlier, which has now been reduced to 25% for people earning more than 5 CR. So this brings down their effective tax from about 42.74 to 39%. Another very big change that they've done is the tweaking the limits for the leave encashment. So whatever, as an employee, whatever leave encashments you earn, that was basically exempted only up to 3 lakhs. Now, as the finance minister also said in her budget speech, this limit was like very old because it was not tweaked. It was based on salary rates that are not in existence anymore. So that is why this amount has been exempted up to 25 lakhs now. So any leave encashments that you're getting at the time of retirement are exempted up to 25 lakhs. Another big change for individuals is that the TDS on EPF withdrawal. If we are looking to withdraw EPF, so before the time limit of 5 years after which they become tax free, that tax slabs have been reduced for all individuals. The other two are primarily the last one I would go to first because that again pertains to individuals. Capital gain exemption. Now, what used to happen was under section 5454F, if you sold a property and you bought a property, you purchased a new one, there was no limit up to the amount that you have to reinvest. So basically, if you bought a property for 100 CR and if you have that amount of capital gain, you can totally set it off and say that I don't have to pay any taxes. But now to actually rationalize, that unnecessary buying expensive properties, the government has capped it that only if the property is up to 10 CR, that is the amount that we'll consider. Any amount that you pay over and above will not give you any capital gain exemption. So property could be 20 CR, but you're getting capital gain exemption for only up to 10 CR. This is one move that they have made. The middle one is very important for all businesses. So earlier, as you all know, that we used to get deduction for certain expenses only when we had actually paid them. For example, bonus. So now any payment to any MSME, so it becomes all the more important that you have to basically cross check with all your vendors if they have any MSME registration. So if they are MSME registered, any payments to them will only be allowed when you've actually made them. You will not get deduction of that expense till you've actually made the payment to them. So this is again, and it also has, I have not put it in here, but there are also certain interest provisions if you're paying them the payment beyond the due date or beyond 15 days to any MSME vendor. So classification of vendors, identifying whether they're MSME is not, has become very important for all businesses and is very important for audit also because every tax auditor has to make note of this and has to disallow any expense that you have recorded but not paid to any MSME. Presumptive taxation. So this is basically, again, a move that was brought in earlier to simplify the tax regime for businesses who were earning up to a certain limit. Earlier, the thresholds for businesses was 2 CR and for professions like doctors, lawyers, engineers was 50 lakhs. They have increased those limits to 3 CR and 75 lakhs respectively, but subject to a condition that 95% of the receipts are received through online channels. So this, I think, is not applicable to most of the doctors because the large part of their receipt is via cash that they receive at the clinics. But well, if you still are able to manage this 95% of your receipts through business, through banking channels, you can avail the higher limits. So, for example, if I earn 60 lakhs in a year as my receipt, so I can give a tax on flat 30 lakhs. That is the presumptive taxation here. Moving on, these were some updates related to the income tax. Now we're going on to GST. So there are a number of changes that they made under the GST Act also. So basically, whenever you record an invoice, we claim input tax credit on that invoice while filing the return. Now, if the payment to that vendor is not payment, the actual payment, not the GST part, is not paid to them within 180 days, you will have to reverse, not even reverse, you will have to pay that input as output tax. And eventually, once you actually pay off that vendor, you can again claim the credit. So this rule was there before also, but there was no mechanism to really track it or to, how to really show it. It just said you reverse your input if you have not paid within 180 days. But now they're making sure that you even pay that liability first, not just reverse, but pay the input. And once you've actually made the payment to the vendor, you can claim the input. Okay, another very important change, CSR expenditure. Any kind of expenditure that any corporate does on CSR, corporate social responsibility, that is not eligible for input tax credit. It will be totally expensed off, no credit will be allowed on it. Now they've set maximum timelines to file GST returns, like the timelines to file ITR, that you can file it belatedly by 1 year, 2 year. So with GST also they've done this. So for example, if you know your registration is cancelled, suspended for that matter because you were not filing returns. So some people they do not go and get it revoked. They said chalne do, band ho gayi, we don't have to file anything, let it be. But now, as and when it's going on, so suppose now the department comes and reopens it, they can only file this return up to 3 years. After the now, because that limit has been set, any time period beyond that, they won't be able to file this, and everything will go in the form of a notice and a response to a notice. So basically, a demand. So whatever liability now arises after 3 years cannot be handled through the return. So basically, you cannot file your returns after 3 years from the due date. They have set a limit. Even for your annual returns, everything 1, 3B, 9, all tax returns have a limit. Now, they have rationalized certain offenses that were earlier considered to be criminal under GST. For example, when a person obstructs or prevents an officer in discharge of their duties. Secondly, when a person tampers with or destroys material evidences or documents. And thirdly, when a person fails to supply information that is required to be supplied under the CGST Act. So earlier, if you were committing any of this offense, it was a criminal offense and you were liable to prosecution. In this budget, they have decriminalized these. Also, they have changed the compounding limits for offenses to kind of, benefit the taxpayers here. And they have increased the monetary thresholds for launching prosecution. So earlier, when there was a tax evasion of 1 CR, more than 1 CR, they could come and prosecute you, basically arrest you. Now those limits have been increased to 2 CR, except of course if the case involves issuance of fake invoices. So anybody who issues fake invoice and evades liability of more than 1 CR, still prosecution can be launched against them, but not for any other kind of evasion. Only in case of fake invoices, it's 1 CR. Other cases, it's 2 CR now. So we now another very, very important change, not for probably any of us here, but for a lot of small unregistered vendors, people who supply through platforms like Amazon, Flipkart. Now, earlier they were mandatorily required to register themselves under GST if they wanted to supply through these e-commerce operators. Now, they do not have to do that. It's not mandatory. In fact, the government has cast the onus on the e-commerce operators to collect tax on their behalf and deposit it. So now even unregistered vendors can supply through e-commerce operators. Secondly, now there was a situation where you are supplying goods from a place, say from Korea to China. So now the goods are not coming into India. So they are totally outside the purview of GST because they are not coming to India, they're not for home consumption. Now, any goods that you've warehoused to any person before clearance for home consumption, it's still not come into the country because it's warehoused in a custom warehouse. So all of those entries now have been put outside the purview of GST retrospectively. However, the government has clarified that they will not be giving any refunds to people who've already paid. Now, for example, if I was a diligent taxpayer and I paid my taxes on such supplies, I'm not getting a refund. But if I was evading taxes at that point of time and not paying, I get a benefit that I don't have to pay it up now. So this is kind of unfair to people who've already paid it. So this is liable to go into a lot of litigation. The clause that they will not be giving refund of these taxes that have already been paid. Lastly, now the third one pertains to primarily transportation or maybe transporters. For example, if I am an exporter in India, I engage a clearing and forwarding agent to help send my goods abroad. So earlier, what happened was the destination of the goods, if it was outside India, ultimately the goods are going for export. There was no GST on the transaction. Now the change is that if both the supplier, that is the clearing and forwarding agent, is giving me services and I am an exporter and I am also in India, when both the supplier and the recipient are in India, it is liable to GST. So tax has to be paid on that. So basically, I think the end just coming out of it is any activity that you do in India, if the incident, if the whole transaction is happening in India, it's irrelevant where the goods are going. If both supplier recipient are in India, the activity is happening in India, there will be GST. So this is all from my side.